If you've watched SpongeBob long enough, you know how it works. No matter what chaos hits Bikini Bottom, nuclear explosion, boat crashes, and evil Plankton Robot, Bikini Bottom will always be back to normal in the next episode. Characters don't grow up, they don't move away, and they definitely don't die. That's part of the charm. But once, SpongeBob broke that rule. There are characters in this show who died standing. Still smiling, still showing up in the background, but never really lives. What used to be a fun story of underwater heroism is now reduced to a background prop, magazine cover, and silent cameo. Making their first appearance in Season 1, Episode 6, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy were not your average superheroes. Part-time protectors of justice, full-time residents of Shady Shoals Retirement Home.
It's not me, old coot.
Yes, that's me.
I'm over here.
Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy were old, dramatic, and extremely confused most of the time. But to SpongeBob and Patrick, they were everything.
Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy must get autographed.
For a lot of fans, these two weird old men became as iconic as the main cast. Their episodes built a whole mythology. The Mermalair, Man Ray, the Dirty Bubble, the Orb of Confusion. Every time they showed up, it felt like the show was dipping into something bigger than Bikini Bottom. They were supposed to be washed-up jokes, superheroes long past their prime. But something about them just clicked. They were tired, they forgot things, Mermaid Man didn't even know where he was half the time. And sure, they were ridiculous, but that was the point. They were cool because they were full of flaws, and still tried anyway. Honestly, that made them kind of inspiring. It sounds silly to say out loud, but they meant something more. They gave Bikini Bottom a sense of legacy. Like, these weren't just fish in a cartoon. This was a world with heroes, with past adventures, living legends. And when you think about the show as a whole, that feeling only came from a few places. One of them was Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. But as much as SpongeBob was celebrated for the genius of Stephen Hillenburg, the voice actors were an equally vital part of its success. For years, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy were brought to life by two television legends, Ernest Borgnine and Tim Conway. Two actors with careers spanning decades, sitcoms, dramas, even war films, lending their voices to a goofy underwater cartoon and making it unforgettable. Borgnine brought this wild, chaotic energy to Mermaid Man, like every line was both a command and a mistake. Meanwhile, Conway played it straight, flat, annoyed, quietly perfect sidekick. Together, they were a parody of old-school dynamic duos.
Need a hand? Super pal.
By the time SpongeBob really hit its peak in the 2000s, both actors were already well into their 80s. It's kind of amazing they kept coming back as long as they did. But eventually, time caught up. In 2012, Ernest Borgnine passed away at age 95. Just weeks before, he had finished recording Patrick Man in Season 9, the last episode Mermaid Man ever spoke in.
Remember, it's up to you to reveal the true face of crime. Sign up to be part of the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy Junior Crime Fighters.
That was a powerful farewell speech. After that episode, the voices stopped. Tim Conway, who played Barnacle Boy, quietly stepped away too, out of respect for his longtime co-star, until later in 2019, when he passed as well. From that point on, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy were still in the show, technically. You'd spot them in comic books, television, even non-speaking appearances in the background. The show didn't recast them, and honestly, that was probably the right call. But for two characters who once defined what it meant to be a hero in Bikini Bottom, that silence is still deafening. And SpongeBob, the show where no one ever really leaves, didn't know what to do with it. At least, until Season 11. That's when the show decided to finally acknowledge their absence. Sort of.
Evil villain Man Ray.
In Season 11, the show finally brought back one of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's most iconic villains, Man Ray. The setup felt familiar, it's classic Bikini Bottom trouble. Time to call in the heroes. But then comes the explanation.
Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy ice pops! They finally made them!
No, not that. The one after that.
Wait a minute, Patrick, we're both wrong. It says right here in issue 55, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are just taking their cryonic nap. But when they wake up in a week, they'll be weak for a week.
Just like that. Just, they're frozen in cryosleep. On paper, this is a clever workaround at the time. It technically acknowledges the characters without changing the show's structure. They're not dead, they're not replaced by other actors, they're just on pause. To be fair, I get the logic. They just can't say both of them are dead. It's SpongeBob. Even death, when it happens, is usually played for laughs. But this is different. It felt like a shrug. It's the show equivalent of saying, don't ask. And maybe this is just me, but it feels worse than saying nothing. Because instead of letting them fade out with grace, the show left them in this weird limbo. Not dead, not active, not anything. It turned them into a plot device that hasn't paid off in years. They've been asleep for a week for over 100 episodes. Their story didn't finish. But again, there's no perfect answer here. The writers were stuck between two bad choices. Do you recast these characters whose voices were tied to real actors? Or do you just stop talking about them? They chose the second option, and in a way, that shows respect. And maybe for a world like Bikini Bottom, where nothing ever ends, silence is the only option. But to the fans who watched these two save the ocean time and time again, it just feels wrong. I mean, if you're going to freeze them in time, at least give them a good reason to rest. Also, you're leaving Bikini Bottom with no real superheroes. Who's going to protect the city without them? Well, actually, they kinda did. They tried to make new ones, from scratch.
Oh no, you don't, you dizzy ding-dong!
But in doing so, they might have accidentally created the weirdest tribute imaginable. In season 14, SpongeBob and Patrick discover a new show to obsess over, the Kelp Bed Kids. It's cheesy, it's black and white, and it's clearly supposed to echo the old superhero nostalgia.
It's a artistical choice.
The characters are all parodies of 50s crime-fighting kid tropes. There's a villain named Ajax, a clubhouse full of secrets, and a mysterious kid hero named Hoops, who saves the day by throwing a literal hoop.
That settles it. Hoops is our favorite kelp bed kid. Let's get out our official Hoops that I bought on CBay.
Of course they did. You get the sense that this could be a fun one-off, a parody of merchandising, a jab at shallow nostalgia. But then it keeps going. SpongeBob and Patrick track down the address on the Hoops. They visit his house, they break in. And sure enough, Hoops isn't a kid anymore. He's just Old Man Walker, now retired, crusty, and half forgotten. The episode then continues with SpongeBob and Patrick helping Hoops, fighting his nemesis from the show, Ajax, who's also an old man now. A ridiculous battle happens in front of Shady Shoals. They win against Ajax, and the episode closes with jargon from the show.
Say my name. I'm Hoops the Poops.
Classic.
Sound familiar? It follows the same pattern. A hero from an old show, now old, cranky, and tucked away in the same town, living in a house full of memorabilia. That's Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's entire arc, beat for beat. Except this time, it's Old Man Walker. Was it meant to be a tribute? Maybe. But it sure feels like a replacement, and one that hits especially weird right after the show officially benched the real heroes. Even if the intent wasn't disrespectful, the result still raises a question. Why does Hoops get a full story when the legends who inspired him never got an ending? I know, I get it. The reason is pretty obvious. There couldn't be. Ernest Borgnine and Tim Conway had already passed, and no one in their right mind wanted a recast. So the show was stuck, with no voice, no dialogue, and no way to carry them forward. But even if they couldn't speak again, they still deserved to be seen off. There were ways you could do it. They could have given us a story told from someone else's point of view. Maybe Man Ray finally wins. Maybe SpongeBob finding a muted old tape. Or maybe a visit back to the Mermalair, now abandoned. Dust on the buttons, costumes sealed behind glass. A quiet moment that says, they're not coming back. And that's okay. Because once you give them that ending, you create a proper space for tribute. Future references become earned. Cameos hit harder. You've closed the book instead of pretending it's still open. But the show never did that. It just kept them frozen. And we fans felt that. Even a silent goodbye can still speak volumes. Heroes don't need monologue. Sometimes all they need is us to remember them right. So yeah, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy didn't get a final episode, but that doesn't mean they're gone. Because in the reruns, they're still fighting crime. In the background, they're still there, mute but never forgotten. For a whole generation of fans, they were the first time we saw old age and courage all exist in the same body. They taught us that even if the powers get rusty, showing up is still heroic. So thank you, Ernest Borgnine, thank you, Tim Conway, and thank you, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, for reminding us that legends don't need goodbyes to leave a legacy. And hey, if SpongeBob has taught us anything, it's that just because something disappears doesn't mean it's gone. It's hiding in places no one's looked for years. And if you like hidden things, you might have missed our last episode. One town, one bus, and the mystery of one SpongeBob episode fans still haven't solved. Heroes don't always get a goodbye, but mysteries, they never really leave.